Thank you for joining me for another video. Um, I wanted to get this video out there sooner. I wanted to record this video sooner, but for those of you who may have seen my post on Facebook, the last couple of days for me have been a bit of a whirlwind. Long story short, I fell the other day, Sunday. I fell just a matter of hours before I was going to record this video, and I apologize. I am still having issues breathing from it, but I fell and miraculously landed on my ribs. So I couldn't really talk. I don't know how I managed to land just on my rib. I mean, there was a little more to it. I dislocated my ankle, so I just popped that back into place. That happens from time to time. I do, have ankles that are prone to popping out of joint, so I just learned to pop them back into place. One of those nifty tricks that you pick up along the way. So the other injury that I took was I fell on my ribs and over here on my right side, and it didn't feel good. Knocked the wind out of me. In the last couple of days, I've been sort of recovering, and it's funny because I actually went to work yesterday, and my coworker actually had to do the majority of the heavy lifting for me because I didn't really have the stability on my right side. So there wasn't really a whole lot that I could do. So I apologize for getting this out there late. In general, I don't like to be late to anything, but it is what it is. This week I really couldn't get out of it very easily. That being said, welcome back, man. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Book of Genesis. A couple of things that did happen. I apologize, it's a bit warm in here. I am wiping sweat from my brow. There were a couple of things that happened over the last week. One of those was my fall on Sunday, and I am fine, by the way. I don't know that I said that. I know I said it on Facebook. I don't believe that I said it in this video. I am fine. There's no, it doesn't appear that my ribs have been cracked or broken or anything like that. My ankle is fine. I mean, that I just popped back into place. It hurts, but I mean, that's just how it is sometimes, I guess. But no bruising so far. I'm not really prone to bruising, though. So, I mean, there was that. That was, let's say, the second. I'm stumbling over my words here. It's not good for a video. Let's say that was the second most exciting thing that happened to me this past week. The first most exciting thing was I mentioned in my last couple of videos that we were expecting a child at any given moment, and she was born last, I believe, Monday. It was the 18th of Tammuz, which was this year, I believe it was the 14th of whatever month I'm in, July. So there's that. Baby girl. We've named her. If you haven't been by the Facebook page yet, you can go by there. And there is a video of the naming ceremony on there. It's only like a minute long, so I mean, it's quick. It's a video of the naming ceremony where I named her publicly after a Torah reading. So I'll just tell you the name that she was given, and then we're going to jump into this. So we called her Sarah Bathia. She was born healthy. She is healthy still. Mama and baby are both healthy. They're both doing well. recovering. She doesn't sleep yet. Neither of them do. My wife doesn't sleep yet because the baby doesn't. But again, some people their ankles dislocate. On a fairly frequent basis. Some people just don't get sleep because babies. Now let's get into the topic at hand. And if I seem short of breath, it's because I am. It's because it does still hurt. When I'm breathing in and everything. And every so often, I do have to just sort of pause and that hurt. I do have to just sort of pause and catch my breath. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the text. We are in Genesis chapter 2. There are a couple of things that I really want to point out. There are two major things that I want to discuss. Then there are, let's say, 3 or 4 minor things that normally I have my Tanakh open to the right page when I start these videos, but I'm not. So right now I'm just stalling. But we're finishing up the book of, the second chapter of the book of Genesis. So now that I'm there, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 2, verses 15 through 25. That'll be the end of the chapter. So, here we go. Let's jump into it. Let me find verse 15 in the Hebrew. ויפח השם אלוהים את האדם ויניחהו וגן עדן לעבודה ולשמרה. And so Hashem God, took the man and set him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to safeguard it. We can come back to that here in a minute. To work and to safeguard it. وَيَسَوْ Hashem Elohim al Hadam Lemor, and Hashem God commanded the man, saying, Mikal es Hagan achol tochel, from every tree of the garden, you may, let's say, you may freely eat, you may surely eat. It repeats the word for eat twice, which in ancient Hebrew appears to have meant, and I say appears to because nobody speaks ancient Hebrew, but in biblical Hebrew it certainly appears every time that it's used. When a word is doubled, it's an intensifier, if that's a word that I can use here. It intensifies the what's being said. So in this case, it's like going over to your grandmother's house and she says, "Oh, you want something to eat?" And you're like, "No, no." And she sets some food in front of you and says, "Go ahead, eat." That sort of a thing. So she's urging you the same way in this passage as well. God is saying, "Go ahead, eat." He's repeating his command twice. Although it's not in the same form, probably the best way to translate it is you should surely eat, or perhaps you are deserving of eating, something of that nature. But of the tree of good and bad knowledge, lo tochal mimenu, don't eat, ki bayom achalcha mimenu mot tamuth, because on the day that you eat of it, on the day of your eating from it, I'm trying to translate this literally, but it's not quite coming out as well as I hoped. Mot tamuth, literally dying, you will die. Okay, but in this case it means you should die. You deserve death at this point. You deserve the death penalty for violating this command that I'm giving you. ויאמר השם אלוהים לא טוב היות היות האדם לבדו. אעשה לו עזר כנגדו. And so Hashem God said, this isn't good for the man, that the man should be alone. I will make for him. These words are kind of difficult to translate. Ezer kenegdo, like literally it means like a helper against him, or perhaps a better translation is a helper that corresponds to him. It just depends on how you are interested in translating it, I suppose. What purpose you're translating it for. If you're just, reading through it, then I don't know what English translations are. What does this one have? This translation has a helper corresponding to him. That is fascinating. I don't really know what other English translations have, but we're going to... actually, I do know the King James Bible has... it calls her a helpmeet. And since that makes just as much sense in modern English as it did, in ancient Hebrew, the word helpmeet, let's just move on because that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help me, it doesn't help you, Life is crazy. What can I say? Sometimes we fall from a height of roughly 6 feet and land on our ribs. The single most protected part of our body. So that's fun. ويسر هشم إلهim من האדמה כל חיות השדה ואת כל עוף השמיים ויבא אל האדם לראות מה יקרא לו וכל אשר יקרא לו האדם נפש חיה הוא שמו. So it tells us then that Hashem God, it says, formed out of the ground every... so the word here is Hayya, which we discussed before, was a non-domesticated animal. So this is going to, let's translate it as beast of the field, and every bird of heaven, and let's say he brought them to the man. God brought them to the man. To see what he would call them. And everything that he would call them, that the man would call them, these living beasts, that was its name. Shemoth lechal habehema, and the man called every domestic animal names. That's what it says. He gave them names. Let's say and to the birds of heaven. And to every beast of the field, but for the man, and to the man, and to Adam, there was not found yet for him a helper that opposed him, a helper corresponding to him. He didn't have a helper. He didn't have, as the King James words it, a helpmate. Now I've lost my place, so I'm going to start. Oh, here we go. Vayipel Hashem Elohim Darlema al Hadamma Vayishan Vayqah Ahath مثل عثو this is just so cool to read. Sorry. وَيِسْغَرْ بَصَرْ تَحْتَنَا. So it says that Hashem, God, caused a very deep sleep to come upon him, and to come upon the man, and he slept, and he being Hashem, took one of the sides, and he filled in basar, flesh, instead of it, in its place. Wayiven Hashem Elohim et hasela, and Hashem God formed or built the side asher laqah min Adam, that he took from the man, leisha wayvieha el Adam, and he brought her. So he fashioned this side that he took from the man into a woman and brought her to the man. Wayomer Adam, and the man said, Zoth haparam, this time, resam me'at samai, uvasar mibsari. This time it is bone like my bone, or bone from my bone, and flesh. It's the same word for meat. Flesh from my flesh. Lezot. Yekare isha kimeish lekaha zot. And so he called it woman. He called her, I guess, woman, because from man she was, it was taken, or she was taken. Sorry, there is no gender neutral pronoun in Hebrew. It's just kind of, it is. You're either male or female. It's kind of how life works. Just figured I'd throw that out there. That's how I'm gonna get banned from YouTube. I see how I am now. Alken, therefore, وَغَزَّبْ ish et avil ve'et imo ודבק באשתו והיו לבשר אחד. So it says that therefore a man should leave his father and his mother, and he should davak, he should get close to his wife, and the two should become one. So the word in this case, davak, is obviously referencing intimacy. Okay, we'll just word it that way. Let's one more first. Just gotta find it. وَهَيُّشْنَهِمْ عَرُّمِمْ, and the two of them were intimate or naked. Adam وَيِشْتَوْ, the man and his wife. وَلَوْ يِثْبَوْشَاشُ, but however they were not ashamed. It wasn't a shameful thing for them to be intimate with each other, to be naked with each other, and sorry, just a bit out of breath, just catching myself here. So after the Torah describes the Garden of Eden, okay, that was what we went into, or what we finished up with last week. The Torah immediately jumps into, and Hashem put the man in the garden. Why does it say to work it and to safeguard it? That is going to be verse, I believe it's 15. Yes, to work it and to safeguard it. So, just so that we're all on the same page here, just so there's no misunderstanding, a full half, which sounds not right, but half of Adam's mission in the garden was to protect it from any threat. Okay, bang up job he did. It didn't end well. You can read ahead. I give you permission to read ahead. It didn't end well for him. Okay. Now, exactly what's meant by safeguard really is left to the imagination. The Torah doesn't get much into it. However, one thing that I do see in it, actually, a couple of things that I see in it is, so I'm going to let you in on a little secret, and then I'll explain fully. Okay. So there are 613, exactly 613 specific commandments in the Torah. Okay, it seems like a lot, but really, it's not. So that's not the secret part. The secret part is you can deduce all 613 from the book of Genesis alone, right? That's really cool. Okay, so here, let me just put my glasses on so that I can check my notes right quick. So here, we can assume that when it says safeguard the garden, it's actually referring to putting in place some form of government, right? So, and why would I say government? Okay, well, because he was tasked with safeguarding the garden. Okay, there's only one way to safeguard things. You can tell people, hey, man, don't destroy that tree. Hey, man, don't kill off all those animals. And I don't want to get into, a big conservation thing, but conservation is clearly taught. Environmental conservation, making sure that you don't drive animal and plant species to extinction. Okay, that is very clearly taught in the first, let's say, 12 chapters. It's actually the first, let's call it 3 chapters. And the first 3 chapters of Genesis, in addition to chapters 6 through 9, I believe, of Genesis, specifically the portion of Noah's Ark. Right? Conservation. Hard to argue that Genesis is not trying to get that point across. Very hard to argue that. Okay? What do I do with my glasses? There's only one way to enforce conservationist efforts, right? So the only way to do that is with a law enforcement force. A law enforcement body of some sort, right? So you have the police, military, whatever the case may be. And so here, I actually wrote this part down. So there are quite a few commandments in the Torah related to the government and its functions. For example, it appears from the Torah that monarchy is God's preferred government form. Okay, that's going to come as a shock to anyone who's a big fan of the democratic process, where democracies are, the norm. Okay, this is the United States. This is Canada, although technically it's part of a monarchy, but it's not a real monarchy. The UK is not really the United Kingdom. It's more of the United Democracy, we happen to have a monarch that we just sort of, call him the king, but he does nothing. If you don't believe me, literally read anything. And if you happen to be in any of the regions of the world, like Australia, most of the Caribbean, okay, you know this. You know that nominally Charles III is king of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and tens of other countries. You know, but just because he is nominally the king doesn't mean that he actually has authority. In fact, he has no authority. He just sort of sits there and looks pretty. He's nowhere near as pretty as his mother, though. His mother I actually liked. Not a fan of Charles, but that's okay. Now I'm just going to get banned in the UK. It's all right. So yeah, if you're a fan of democracy and a weak head of government, it may come as a shock to you that monarchy is actually, it appears in the Torah anyway, to be God's form of, his preferred form of government. Also happens to be the most natural form of government to humanity. So an example that is more relevant to the topic at hand when it comes to laws relating to government, rather than saying, you know, oh, monarchy is the preferred method, democracy sucks, you know, that kind of thing. And I am a monarchist. I prefer monarchy. However, I happen to live in a republic. So, you know, every 4 to 8 years, I have to deal with an idiot from the opposing party being elected. You know, that he or she, whatever the case may be, completely undoes everything that the idiot from the former party did for the last 4 to 8 years. That's just how that works in the US. So an example of specific laws, excuse me just a second while I wipe the sweat from my face. Specific laws that the Torah specifically mentions that the government needs to do that are relevant to this would be things like establishing a court system, right? Having a clear chain of command, I don't know if there is a civilian equivalent to that. Having a clear government structure, having police officers, right? These are all things that the Torah actually specifically says that we're obligated to do as Jews, but it doesn't really expound on exactly how to do that. That's one of those things that we get into in the oral Torah, right? Now, if there were police officers in the Garden of Eden, first of all, that's hilarious. Okay, it's just a funny thought, because everyone thinks of running around in the Garden of Eden. Everybody in there is naked, right? So, you know, if you got a police officer in there, he's going to be naked too. And I'm just imagining, you know, somebody steals, I don't know, let's say a pea, and so now you have a naked cop who's chasing down a naked bad guy and, you know, tackles him, and it's funny in my mind. Okay, I've actually seen videos of it happening in real life, and it's well, not the naked cop part, but clothed cop tackling a naked criminal of some sort, even if that criminal just went streaking. It's funny stuff. It's funny stuff, right? But yeah, police officers, things like that. I completely lost my train of thought. Let me look at this. Oh yeah, so just an interesting fact here. The sages actually doubled down on the bit about you're not allowed to, or the requirement, I should say, to have police officers, a court system, that sort of thing, because they actually forbade a Jew to live in a place where there is no law and order. You know, there's no police force, there's no court system to maintain law and order. Why is it important that a Jew live in a place that has those things? Well, because law and order is a good thing. It's how we protect people, right? So another bit of information that we can glean from these verses is that the Torah absolutely is concerned about environmentalism. Specifically, making sure, this is conservation, okay, this is the dictionary definition of conservation, making sure we don't drive things to extinction, right? Not animals, not humans, that sort of thing. So God does give Adam permission to eat from basically whatever he wants, except for the tree of knowledge, and there's a reason for that I'm going to save for when we start talking about it in chapter 3, right? But for now, I'm going to tell you something that's going to contradict what I've heard some people say. I actually heard it from Christians, but these Christians were not especially well-educated Christians, right? Their views actually don't represent really very many in Christianity. So this isn't meant to be, an attack against Christians or anything, not against Christianity or anything like that. But I've actually heard that by God forbidding them to eat from the tree of knowledge, he was withholding knowledge from them. He was, telling them you're not allowed to pursue knowledge. And the sin was when they ate from the tree of knowledge and they pursued knowledge. That was the sin. And therefore, God is the bad guy of the story. There are people out there who believe that, right? It happens that that's a Gnostic doctrine. Gnosticism was a lot bigger back in the early days of Christianity, and it actually has had a significant influence on Christianity, right? But Christianity, it would be incorrect to say that Christianity is a Gnostic religion. To be fair, Gnosticism also did have an impact of some sort on Judaism as well. So, I can't place all the blame on Christians here, right? Now, and that's just bad theology to make God out to be the bad guy, right? That's bad theology. There's a cure for bad theology if you read the Torah. That's the cure, the Torah. Now, the Torah is going to devote the majority of the rest of the chapter to Eve's creation. So before getting to Eve's creation, God tells us, hey, listen, it's not good for man to be alone, right? He has to sort of give this introduction, right? Then the text tells us that God brought all the animals to Adam, and whatever Adam called the animals, that remained their name. Now, I'm going to tell you a wild secret that's actually implied in that you probably never thought about. Because who thinks about these things, right? So, if I'm writing a book, and I'm writing it obviously in my form of modern English, right? What's going to happen in, let's say, 400 years from now? Obviously, nobody's going to be reading, because it's my book. Nobody's going to be reading it. But popularity aside, right? Are they going to be able to understand it as well? Well, maybe, maybe not. For reference, the King James Bible and William Shakespeare were around 400 years ago. Okay, so we can see how we moved from that form of English to the variety that I'm speaking now in a period of 400 years, right? So, a lot going on, for the evolution of a language. But one thing that does sort of ring clear is it's really hard for something that was named one thing, like say, dog. Okay, if it's called a dog now, in 400 years it might be called something else. In 1,000 years it may be called something completely different. Um, I don't know. We'll see. 1,000 years ago, dog in English. Well, okay, so that's probably a bad example because it was actually the same. Dog. Or Hund for hound, right? That's where we get the German Hunde, and the Hund was also, it also meant 100 in Old English. Because again, I study languages. I'm an amateur linguist. I love that sort of thing. I could sit here and tell you all sorts of really cool things about languages and dead languages and ancient languages and how, and my sisters will testify that in high school I was always like, did you know that this word it comes from this Latin root and it means this and this is why we have it today? Okay, they'll tell you, they'll testify, right? So how do you keep things from retaining, or how do you keep them retaining their original name? How do you keep, the Torah text says, and this is a period of roughly 2,000 years that from the time that Adam lived until the time that the Torah was written down, how are you going to keep the names of those animals all that time? Well, it's not easy. Right, so the easiest way to keep the name of any given animal roughly the same over a period of 2,000 years or so is to write it down, which raises an interesting possibility. I'm not saying that Adam was the very first person on the planet to write, although perhaps he did. What I am saying is we do know that his descendants, the Sumerians, were the very first civilization in the world that we're aware of anyway, that they created writing at that point. And there's actually even a myth about it. Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata. It's a great myth. Lots of threats and whatnot, and we're actually going to talk about that at a later point in Genesis. I believe it's chapter 10, but we'll get there when we get there. So the only surefire way to preserve the names of things is to write them down. Okay. Now, ultimately, Sumerian language fell out of use and gave rise to Semitic languages like Akkadian. Okay, that would be an Eastern Semitic language. Hebrew is a Western Semitic language. It's a Northwestern Semitic language. So there is a little bit of drift, linguistic drift. Do I believe that Adam called dogs Kalev? No, I don't. Do I think that whatever Adam called dogs remained its name for a while? Yeah, absolutely. Assuming he had dogs, I assume he had dogs. I love dogs. Dogs are great. And mankind has been with them for 10,000 plus years. So everyone's okay with that. Everyone's okay with Adam having a dog. So well, then let's pretend Adam had a dog, right? Cerberus or something. It means spot. In case you're curious, that's right. The hellhound that of Greek mythology that guards the gates to the underworld, the three-headed hellhound. His name is Cerberus. Literally means spot, and we wonder why we still name dogs Spot today. So I'm not saying that Adam was the very first person to put ink to paper. Although in his case it would have been a little bit closer to stylus to clay tablet, but his descendants certainly did. So it certainly appears that there was perhaps some sort of potential for writing, if not at the time of Adam and Eve, then shortly thereafter before the language had changed too much, right? Now, we're going to come to the creation of Eve. The Torah tells us that God caused a deep sleep to come on Adam, and Uh, then God took one of his sides, one of Adam's sides, and he fashioned it into a wife or a woman, depending on how you translate it, right? That was suitable for him. And every year when we read this Torah portion, I have to tell you this, I read the Midrash that goes with it. And every year I come out of it just loving my wife more. Because the way that the sages describe Eve, not physically, but more her demeanor, I see in my own life. I see that she is an opponent when I need someone to oppose me, in the same way Eve is that way. This is actually the meaning of Ezer Kenegdo, that she would be a helper against him. She would help him when he needed help, but be opposed to whatever it is that he was doing when he needed to be opposed. Put my glasses back on, find a spot in my notes. So I do every year gain more appreciation for my wife, more appreciation for Eve, for that matter. And I hope Adam knows what he had, because, man. And you should know that every time your wife, gentlemen, if those of you who happen to be married, if your wives encourage you to do things that you don't want to do, you should know they are emulating Eve. They're just doing the same thing that she did. When you need to be opposed, when you're dragging your feet on something, when your wife wants you to take out the trash, and you're just like, yeah, okay, give me 5 more minutes, and then 2 minutes later she says, take out the trash. It's been 3 hours. Come on, take it out already. It just, that's part of her job. That's exactly what the Torah says that Eve was to Adam. That's exactly what she's meant to do. She's meant to be a little bit of a friction burn, if you will, a little bit of making her or making you irritated enough to get up and do whatever it is you need to do to make things better, right? So now, here's what you might not understand from the text itself. Okay. Now, the text certainly makes it appear that, at least from the literal reading of the text, that Eve was created from a part of Adam. That's not the case. Also, what's interesting to note is that it's not the case that many translations out there actually say that God took a rib from Adam's side, that he took a rib and fashioned Eve out of a rib, right? And there are jokes about it, God comes to Adam and says, oh, I've got the perfect woman for you, she's great, she's wonderful, she's going to be everything you ever needed, she's going to be everything you ever wanted, she's going to be gorgeous, her personality is fantastic, and Adam's just like, that sounds wonderful, God, what's it going to cost me? God says, an arm and a leg, and Adam says, okay, what can we do with the rib? It's funny, it's cute, nowhere near accurate, and that's part of what makes it funny, but it is humorous. So as it turns out, the mistranslation as a rib, there's actually a reason for it. And that reason is, here's kind of a fun fact for you, there was a myth, a Sumerian myth, about, I believe it's called Enki and Ninhursag, Enki was a god, and or it was what they called a god, and Ninhursag was a goddess, or what they called a goddess. Enki became ill in this myth, and so Ninhursag, the lady of the mountain, caused him to go to sleep and took a rib of his and formed it into the goddess Ninti. Ninti means Lady of the Rib, but it also means like Lady of the Living. Well, guess what, Eve? Guess what her name in Hebrew? Guess what it means? Hawa means living. Okay, and we haven't gotten to the to her naming yet. So at this point, I suppose you can imagine her to not have a name. I'm joking. She had a name, right? So Hawa was the Hebrew of her name. Now, how that came into English, let me tell you. Since I mentioned before that I used to bother my sisters with this sort of thing. So Hawa went from Hebrew into Greek as Hewa, right? So Hewa went into Latin as Ewa. As Latin evolved, that W in the middle, that W sound, became a V sound. So it was Eva. Then Eva came into German as Eva, which eventually came into English, modern English, as Eve. Very cool stuff. And if it were written down, you would definitely see it. But alas, it is not written down. Now, Ninti, I suspect, was actually a deified Eve, which was common to do at the time. So that's where all that confusion comes in. Okay, so God took one of his sides, one of Adam's sides, not one of his ribs. Now, admittedly, this is a distinction without really much of a difference. Let's be honest here. Okay, but what it does allow for is this. Okay, Adam was not the very first human being to have been created. He was not the very first of our species, right? He was not the very first Homo sapiens. We've been over this. Okay, if no other time than the last 3 times I said it. The idea that he is that's just not scientifically factual, but it is what the Torah wants us to believe. Okay. Now, he was the first. Adam was the very first person to recognize his creator, and the sages actually hinted it. I would even argue that they outright, openly say it without actually saying it, when they tell us that there were 974 generations before Adam. Okay, where they got this, if you look it up in the Talmud, it's there for you to see. I'm gonna wipe my brow because it's toasty in here. I have to have the air conditioning unit off because otherwise you wouldn't be able to hear me. You would just hear everything going on around me, which happens to be the air conditioner unit. So it gets very warm in here very quickly. Look at my notes. So there were 974 generations before Adam that were striving to be created, right? And this means they were reaching forward. They kept making progress toward understanding their creator the way Adam did it. Adam just really sort of beat them to it. So there's that. That's fine. With all of that in mind, Adam probably, this part's going to upset some people, was the chieftain of his tribe. As a matter of fact, the Sumerian Kings list calls him the last of the kings who dwelled in tents and the first of the kings who lived in houses, apparently. What does that mean? Well, that means that he left a nomadic lifestyle and settled down in the city, which fits with what we talked about before, right? Or not really a city, but a village in a settlement, okay? Now, he was the leader. Adam was the leader, okay? Otherwise, the text would not talk about it at all. Plain and simple. That's just the way that Semitic storytelling goes. You don't talk about someone unless they are really super duper important. And as it happens, a king is pretty important. It doesn't get much more important. In fact, the only person who could be more important than a king is a god, which is what the majority of ancient mythologies are filled with. Kings and gods, kings and gods, kings and gods. So he would have been roughly the equivalent of a king at the time. Probably had more than one wife. Gasp, he just said that. What sort of a world are we living in when the ancients, who clearly practiced polygamy, are polygamous? Anyway, moving on from sarcasm. So Adam probably had more than one wife, okay, and we can understand that just from the fact that he was a king of sorts. B, there are legends that he had more than one wife, and C, one of those legends is about a woman named Lilith. We're not going to talk about Lilith because she's extra biblical and also really sort of not a good person. Okay, she actually goes off with the Nahash later on in the story. The Nahash is the snake that's not really a snake in Genesis chapter 3 that we're going to talk about. She goes off with him and marries him. And they have children, but we'll maybe get into that if we have time when the time comes. Okay, so where was I going with this? So Eve was probably not Adam's only wife. What does the text say? It says that he took, while Adam was asleep, God took from his side and formed Eve, right? So what if it just means that he took one of his wives at one of his sides and formed her the same way that he formed Adam? Perhaps she had a vision. Perhaps she had a dream. Perhaps she had a visionary dream. Or, something. I don't know, man. Did I mention I fell? And that's what we're dealing with here. Eve was not formed in the same way that, or she was formed in the way that Adam was. So the Torah is very shy in how it talks about things. Okay, there are a lot of things that it hints at rather than outright says most of the time, right? So sex in the Torah is almost non-existent. It's always spoken through euphemisms, right? Joseph says to Potiphar, or to Potiphar's wife. So he says to Mrs. Potiphar, listen, I can't sleep with you because my master's entrusted everything that he has to me except the bread that he eats. It's a reference to his wife, and sex. When it talks about Adam and Eve having children, it says Adam knew his wife, right? So it uses metaphors. So when we're saying that she was one of his sides, she was a woman at his side, right? As if she were his side. Now, the Torah wants us to remember Eve as she was portrayed, not as a goddess, not as one of several wives, but as God's perfect mate, let's call it, for Adam, right? And this brings us to polygamy. Polygamy is permitted by the Torah. I am generally in favor of polygamy if done correctly. Now, that being said, I have one wife. I am monogamous. And I will be the very first person to tell you monogamy is the best option because, in my opinion, that is the ideal that God had in mind, right? And I think that we could see that pretty clearly from this story where God has one man and one woman, right? Now, I think this is also an allusion to since we know that Adam was a king, I think that this is also an allusion to the regulations that are laid out for kings in the Torah. One of which is a king is not allowed to have too many wives, right? Polygamy, monogamy, right? Monogamy is best. Monogamy is always best. Monogamy is the ideal. Polygamy is permitted. Okay, there's a difference between best and yeah, so we allow it. But I think that the ideal has always been monogamy, right? So. Where was I going? Oh yeah, we can actually see in the Tanakh what happens whenever a king has too many wives. You look at the very last verses that the Tanakh has to say about King Solomon, and what does it tell us? It tells us that he was led astray to worship foreign gods because he had many wives. That's why polygamy is... monogamy is best. Why? Because wives exert an influence over their husbands. If you have too many wives, you have too many people exerting influence over you. If there are too many people exerting influence over you, guess what? That's not enough influence for God. Just figured I'd throw that out there, right? Now, there are two minor points that I want to close up with. Okay, the first one is in verse 24. Adam says that a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. The two should become one flesh, right? It does say that. You don't have to check me on that, but go ahead and do it. A lot of people understand that as being a reference to sex. I used to, so no judgment if that's how you believe it. I'll judge you for everything else, just not that. Just kidding. The reality is, though, that it's not a reference to sex. It's actually a reference to having children. Why? Because when a husband and wife are intimate with each other, they are not one flesh. They are not a single body. However, the product of that intimacy, a child, is part mother, part father, placed into one body. So the two become one, right? They do become one flesh. Okay. Now in verse 25, put back on my glasses. This is the last verse. It tells us that they were naked. It tells us that they were intimate. I translate it as intimate. Most people will translate it as naked, and that's fine. This is a reference to sex, right? It's telling us that this time when they had sex, it was nothing to be ashamed of. However, there was another time when it would be something to be ashamed of. And that is a little bit of a teaser for chapter 3. With that, I am done. Thank you for watching. I apologize that I am so late in bringing this video, so late in getting it out. Hopefully it can be better. How dare I? If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Share it with anyone you want to. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, right? And make sure that you turn the notifications on. If you're on Facebook, go find me on Facebook. Just type into the search bar an unorthodox Jew, and you'll find me pretty quickly. I have pictures, or not pictures, a video on there of the naming ceremony of my new baby girl, if you would like to see what that looks like. So you can go check that out, that's fun. That being said, I'm done, and until next time, shalom.